welcome everybody. Welcome back to Two Goalies, One Mic, episode 163, brought to you by Fatty Beer Company, Western New York's premier market and tap room with over 300 beers to choose from. Make sure you get your local Fatty for Monday Night Football. This coming Thursday for the home opener. If you're not going to the game, make sure you get your local Fatty. Tell them Two Goalies, One Mic sent you. The Fatty Beer in Lancaster is holding their third annual block party. I've been to the first two. They've been an absolute riot. About first one, there was like 1,000 people there. Obviously, with the weather the way it is right now, we still got some decent weather ahead of us. Make sure you go check it out. They have food trucks, wings, beer. You're allowed to bring your own beer, but we prefer you go to Fatty Beer for all your adult beverage needs. And of course, Buffalo Go apparel, your shirts, your hats, your hoodies. Make sure you check them out. Buffalo Go. They have this beautiful cap up there right now, available for your Sabres hat needs at Buffalo Go Co. on Instagram and Twitter. BuffaloGo.com at Fatty Beer on Instagram and Twitter. Connor, the home opener is Thursday. The LA Kings, Sabres off to about as bad of a start as you could, not want. LA Kings are a tough team. You live there in California. You get to see them more than any of us do. You probably got them on local TV quite a bit. Your thoughts on what's to come Thursday night? I think they're going to be without Drew Doughty, right?
Yeah, he's out for like 4 months.
Yeah. So obviously that's a big loss, but he's not the only. Unlike the Sabres, when you lose a player like that on Buffalo, it's a lot more detrimental. Not so detrimental to the LA Kings. Just your thoughts on that matchup coming from a guy who gets to see them play more often than we do.
It's going to be tough. I think it's going to be arguably as tough as the Devils. The Devils are a pretty good team that underachieved last season, and it led to the firing of Lindy Ruff, obviously. In the LA Kings, they have a lot of forward depth, as you said. Kevin Fiala, Adrian Kempe, Trevor Moore, Quentin Byfield, Philip Deneau, who is a very, very solid shutdown third-line center. They have a really good defensive core as well, even without Drew Doughty. And they picked up Darcy Kemper in the offseason, who is 2 or 3 seasons removed from a Stanley Cup, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think I am. Even so, he's a pretty good goalie. He's better than the goaltending they had last season in Cam Talbot. So it's going to be a tough matchup. And the Sabres didn't play particularly well at home last season, especially starting off in games in the first period. It's a team that's really physical. They play with a lot of speed. They kind of emulate what the Sabres were talking about all offseason, playing with a lot of speed, getting in on the forecheck, and succeeding at winning puck battles, which the Sabres did not do basically any of against the New Jersey Devils. So it's going to be a really, really tough matchup. They're well coached. I think they're pretty disciplined, and they have a lot of skill. So you got to be really on your keys, and you have to play a much cleaner game than they did this past weekend, which, like you said, for the most part, aside from a few bright spots in probably Devin Levi and honestly not too many other players, you're going to need to play a lot better than that. So we'll see what happens. But the LA Kings are not necessarily the team. It's a pretty weird team to have your home opener against as well.
Yeah.
It's not your typical home opening matchup, and maybe that'll be good. They've played the Kings well at home in the past, so hopefully that gets them out of their heads a little bit. It's not a Toronto. It's not an Ottawa. It's not a typical matchup. So hopefully that'll help a little bit, but it's a really good team.
Yeah, me and producer Steve were talking about this. That is an odd team to have your home opener against. I mean, I know we started the season, obviously, over in Europe, 2 games in Prague. But still, just, I don't know. I mean, how are the LA Kings? Obviously, they're playing probably a big chunk of games now on the East Coast, right? They just don't come here to play Buffalo.
Definitely not.
Yeah. One noteworthy thing, that came from today, obviously we saw the line matchups without both Paterka and Benson. We did see Peyton Krebs practicing on the first line. I don't really know how to feel about it. I mean, I don't know. I know both Krebs and Benson haven't been ruled out for Thursday, but I mean,
Paterka Peterka and Benson, they haven't been ruled out for Thursday.
They have, not what I'm saying, they haven't been ruled out. Also, one quick mistake on my part. This is actually episode 164. My apologies, everybody. I listed it as 163. Just looked here on our show notes. This is 164. So I do apologize. But regardless, Peyton Krebs practicing on the first line ahead of the home opener. I'm interested. I don't know. On the wing, obviously.
Yeah.
Turkish spot, but
it at least gives him, let's say that does transpire the way that it did in practice in the game on Thursday. It at least gives him his best chance of playing with quality line mates since he's been on the team. I think everybody has thought about him in the sense that he's only really had fourth and third line opportunities, and he's never fully had the opportunity to play with really good line mates. And when he has, he's actually been pretty good. So I'm intrigued by it. I think it's definitely a better option than Jordan Greenway, who is a physical, tough player, and maybe that is a good in-game adjustment. But if you want a higher ceiling in terms of offensive playmaking and shot creation, I think Peyton Krebs is probably a better option than Jordan Greenway on that line. I will say, though, based upon everything I read today, it seems like Peterka and or Benson have a legitimate possibility of playing on Thursday, and this was more so a placeholder, a similar type of player to Peterka, not necessarily the same player, of course, but at least more similar than Jordan Greenway, that can give Tuck and Thompson some reps and get them back into a rhythm going into that home opener. So I'm at least slightly optimistic that Peterka will be back, especially when it's a head injury, as we saw with Josh Allen on Sunday. It seems that a day-to-day diagnosis is obviously much better than week to week. So hopefully it's on the milder side of head injuries. Obviously, you have to take them very, very seriously, especially early in the season in such a physical game. But I do think that it's not necessarily anything anyone should freak out over. As we've discussed, the depth isn't the greatest on this team, but giving your young, basically huge piece of the Eichel trade an opportunity on the first line is not the worst thing in the world.
No, and that's a big thing too, is maybe now if again, this is like a worst case scenario thing, if we do head into the home opener and Peyton Krebs is on that first line, this is as good of a chance as we're going to see as to what he can provide with skill players. Obviously, he was the top prospect Vegas had when that trade was made. Obviously, he has not reached that, even, I think, basement, not even the ceiling, the basement that we'd hope to see from him. There's a lot there. We've seen a lot of playmaking ability. We've seen what he's developed to, being put in third and fourth line situations, a scrappier side of him. But yeah, again, that's not why you brought him here. You brought him here. He was a centerpiece of that trade originally, and you need him to start showing that value, for a lack of a better way of saying it. You were the centerpiece of arguably the biggest trade in franchise history. If you don't want to count Dominik Hasek, which nobody expected Dominik Hasek to be what he was when Muckler traded for him. But we all knew what Jack Eichel was. And if you're the centerpiece of that trade, there's a lot of pressure on you to, show that you were worth the value of the player going the other way. So I'm excited to see it, but also this goes back to the things that we've been talking about. I've tweeted about it today. Lack of depth. That this is what the lineup will look. You had Jacob Bryson on the wing today. Bryson practicing on the wing. That takes me back to, who was it? Mark Pysyk, when we were using him as a winger.
Brandon Montour in the
Brandon Montour, under Ralph Kruger. I don't want to see Jacob Bryson playing on the fourth line wing, man. He showed shades that he could be a serviceable, 6th or 7th NHL defenseman at the end of last season. He didn't look bad. Why? Just why?
Very ironically, Sam Reinhart just scored an unbelievable goal against the Bruins.
I have him in a futures parlay. I have him scoring 50 or more, Thompson scoring 40 or more, and I want to say Skinner scoring 40 or more.
Yeah,
$50 bet pays out over 11,000.
That would be nice. That was pretty depressing to watch as you were talking about our lack of forward depth. But at least we got something pretty good back for Sam Reinhart and Devin Levi. But yeah, it's not amazing. Obviously, playing overseas and having 3 forwards get injured in the same weekend is not ideal. I don't think any NHL team would be in a really good spot if that exact situation happened. But other teams obviously have higher quality to push up the lineup from their bottom of their lineup as well. So, yeah, it's definitely not ideal, but it's also why you have as good of a team in Rochester as you do. You could bring up a guy like Rusick. You already have Kulik up. You could bring up a guy like Rosian. You're high on Noah Ostlund. You're high on Anton Wahlberg, who seems as though he has more of an NHL-ready type body. So you have these guys that you're trusting in this prospect system, which Kevin Adams has said that's the reason that they didn't really go out and get all of these free agents or make more trades than they did for Matthew Savoy for Ryan McLeod, is because of this prospect system that they've been developing for years and years and years on end still. And if none of these guys have the opportunity to crack the NHL lineup, even if 3 opening night starters are already injured, then what does that say about their development? So
Exactly.
I hope it gives some of these guys the opportunity, especially if more injuries start to pile up. God forbid they do, because the injury luck for this team has not been great recently in recent seasons. So that would be pretty bad. But yeah, you got to trust in your prospect system. You got to trust in your organizational foundation. Obviously, we don't trust that because us as fans and commenters have not seen them produce aside from in Rochester. And even the NHL team as a whole has not produced in a year and a half now for the most part. So not an ideal situation, but hopefully Peterka's healthy, Benson's healthy, and they can roll up the lineup that they were planning on for the home opener on Thursday.
Another question I want to ask you is, obviously we're not going to get, Lindy's not the Lindy of old, but that's a 9-hour plane ride back from Prague. What was that plane ride like? And what do you think Lindy's response was once they got back on home soil?
It probably, there's only so much you can do after the game. And I think the plane ride hopefully served as a bit of a respite, as a bit of a cool down from what was likely a pretty hectic week. Obviously, they didn't play that well, but they were in each game, technically. They played really well in the second half of the first game, and they were up 1-0 in the second period of the second game. So obviously the scores aren't amazing, but it's not like they got their doors blown off. They performed relatively well against what is likely going to be a pretty good team that 2 seasons ago had 112 points. So I don't think the sky is falling quite yet. And obviously, as you said, Lindy's a tough guy and he demands accountability, but you're not going to be ripping into these guys. You're not going to make Alex Tuck and Tage Thompson sit in the back of the plane by the bathroom for 9 hours just because they lost to the Devils 3-1 and 4-1. I think when they got home, there was probably a pretty stern talking to, and even in the beginning of practice today, they focused for the first 20 minutes of practice on what absolutely needs to be better for the rest of the season, and that's the power play. And if they can't fix that, a lot of these issues are going to persist. They mentioned today that they need more speed going into the zone. You can have as much speed as you want if each team is going to clog up the blue line and stop any zone entry that they possibly can. You need creativity. You need other options for zone entries and puck retrieval than just banging your head against the wall and trying to force it into the zone and bring it in with possession. So those are the types of things I think he needs to focus on and the coaching staff needs to focus on, rather than just making them skate Herbies and punishing them for what was, not an ideal opening weekend in Prague, but it's also 2 games in and not the end of the world.
Yeah, again, I guess we can call them a competitive podcast. I was listening today, after the whistle, and they asked they asked that question of each other, like as players who used to play for Lindy, and I forget which one of them said it. A similar situation where they got boat raced, and the plane ride was just deathly silent. Nobody even wanted to get up. Nobody wanted to get this because they was afraid of like the old Lindy, what his reaction might be. But it's like you said, it's not like in the movie Goon where you're telling a hey, you're riding piss hole in the back of the bus, for whatever shift you played where you weren't paying attention or whatever it was. But I have to imagine once they got back, man, like the difference. I mean, I feel like Don Granato compared to what we heard after the firing, how the tone about him kind of changed afterwards from the media. Like I felt like it would have been more relaxed under Don Granato, whereas with Lindy, it's like let's forget about it. It's in the rearview mirror, but let's really focus in on the details where you guys weren't focusing, paying attention. Again, like I can't articulate as best as most other people, but just being more honed in on those small details, and obviously just looking like you weren't ready to play. Because I think the one thing that bugged most of us is that was the biggest issue we had with this team last season, is just not being ready to play once the puck dropped. And I would hope that this is the last time we see, at least not just a single game like that, but back-to-back games like that.
Yeah, I would say he's focusing on solutions at the moment. He's coached in this league for years. He understands what it takes to win in this league. I think he knows that at its best, this is a group that can compete, and it just wasn't there on Friday and Saturday for the most part. Like I said, like they were in each game. They, as you mentioned, boat race. Like I don't think we got boat raced. I really do not believe that.
I was wording it the way they did.
Each game was yeah, exactly. But like each game wasn't uncompetitive. And if you get boat raced at home on Thursday night against the Kings, that's a much different story. But I do expect a good response. I think this group has some pride. They're young enough that I think that they can have a pretty short memory. And you still have a lot going for you. You still have your top guys that are, well, aside from Peterka, hopefully going to be pretty healthy. You have pretty good goaltending, and your defense is at least has some continuity from last season, and hopefully they can figure it out in terms of the turnovers and what led to some of the goals this past weekend. So I think Lindy at this point in his career is a solution-motivated coach, and he's going to do what's necessary to get it through these guys' minds that you need to play the way that we've been talking about for the past month, or else it's going to be the same exact results as last season, because the roster is not that much different aside from the bottom six. And one guy they added is now out for 3 to 6 weeks. So you got to be better, and you got to stick to your keys and play a much cleaner hockey game, especially in the first period on Thursday.
We got a couple questions, not questions, but statements here in the peanut gallery. Dahlin's got to be playing hurt. The first game was his worst game ever. I mean, I don't know if I could, what I would rank that against. Probably something from his rookie year. But, yeah, he did not look good at all in either game, let's be honest.
I mean, I thought he had a few plays he would like back. I think there was one pass he was trying to make in the neutral zone that led to a goal. But I think at least defensively, he was relatively fine. It's not like he was getting walked the entire game. I think he obviously wants to add a more physical element to his game. But at the same time, like, he's not the biggest guy on the team, and he doesn't need to be throwing around 10 hits a game. So, yeah, I'm worried about his injury, but at the same time, like, I'm not worried about him as a player. I want him to be healthy, but I'm not gonna say that this is gonna be a theme moving forward for what I think is a top 10 defenseman in the game. I think there's a lot of
today too, so it's not like he's been held out of practice.
I think there are a lot of other issues on the defense to worry about, namely Yoki Haru and Samuelson. I think Yoki Haru.
His days was he paired with Dahlin again today?
I didn't see the.
I'm gonna take a look right now.
Yeah, so
he better not be.
Yoki Haru had a pretty good season last year, and I would say pretty good, relatively lightly. He didn't do anything that
better than expected. Put it that way.
Yeah, better than expected, and he didn't do anything so egregiously horrible to stick out, but he also wasn't incredible. whereas Samuelson has been largely hurt for most of his career. And I would say this past weekend, he was a bit of a liability in his own zone, which is not what he's known for. He's known for being that shutdown defenseman that can play tough minutes against top lines. And he gave away a couple bad turnovers in his own zone, forcing passes up the wall that led to one of the goals in the first game, and even that sliding attempt on a goal in the second game, which you like the effort, but I think the execution wasn't ideal. So I think you need a better effort and a better performance from the defense as a whole, not just Ellie.
So this is per Jason Moser on Twitter. The Sabres lines today. Thompson centering Krebs and Tuck on the first line. Cousins centering Kulik and Quinn. McLeod centering Zucker and Greenway in your third line. And then Lafferty centering Malenstein and defenseman Jacob Bryson. And absolutely nothing changed with the defensive pairings. Jokiharju was still paired with Dahlin, Byram with Power, and Samuelson with Clifton. UPL in the starters, not with Levi at the other end. So obviously we would expect UPL to get the start on opening night. But yeah, I'm not happy about the defensive pairings being the same, personally.
So Power and Jokiharju last season were pretty horrible together. I would say that was one of the worst pairings they possibly could have had. And I did like Byram and Dahlin together once that trade was made. So
I did too.
I would say potentially Dahlin and Byram, maybe, I guess, Power and Samuelson, and then you could have a third line pairing of Clifton and Jokiharju, but those are two right shot defensemen. And I would say those guys aren't necessarily skilled enough with the puck that one of them would be completely comfortable playing on their offhand. So given that you have four left shot defensemen on your decor, those bottom two pairings, if you're going to put Dahlin with Jokiharju, kind of have to be the way that they are. Unless you wanted to do, you kind of have to, because Dahlin's playing on his offside regardless. Well, I guess he wouldn't be with Jokiharju. Either way, it's an uneven shot handedness as far as the defense goes, and it doesn't make for a perfect pairing, especially when at this moment currently there's not that much trust in Samuelson, Jokiharju, or Clifton. I mean, I like Clifton's physicality, but I think we know what we're getting with Clifton. I think his floor is pretty good, but his ceiling's not that high. So
he's a third pairing guy.
They ran back the exact same defensive unit. I think we all would have loved a guy like Brett Pesce. We all would have loved to trade for a guy like Rasmus Anderson. I think we would all still love that, to raise the ceiling a little bit more of this defensive group. But they did play relatively good last season, and if they do figure it out a little bit, provided that Dahlin is at hopefully 100% pretty soon, I think they can figure it out. I'm not as worried about the defense as I am about the depth of the forward group and the lack of goal scoring as it currently stands.
Yeah, I think that's just, again, I think I think you're right. Well, I think from what's reported, hopefully the injuries to the concussion with Paterka isn't one that's going to linger and be long lasting. Obviously, anything with your head, you just want to make sure that you're not going back out there until you're absolutely ready and cleared. And you feel comfortable going back out there. Remember what happened with Dylan Cousins last season after that fight with Hathaway. I think he probably sustained a concussion in that fight, and he wasn't the same guy for the rest of the season. Yeah, I don't want to see that for JJ, especially with how good and talented of a player he is up and down the ice. And then Benson, we didn't really get any clarification on what it is, just a lower body injury.
Yeah, just lower body. They don't specify.
But hopefully they're both back in the lineup. But again, just goes to show that, and I got into it with a couple people today on social media. I said, this is an example of what I've been saying for months, what we've been saying for months, that one or two injuries in your tops could derail your entire season. People come back and say that would derail anybody's season. I'm like, really? Because it didn't derail Vegas's season when the amount of times they've been to the Cup and the amount of times they've been deep in playoff runs. How many times they've been with Mark Stone?
Yeah, I would say about Vegas though, they've been one of the more aggressive teams in the league in terms of trading for anybody, and we know that the Sabres aren't going to do that, given the spending cap, which we probably think is in place, and also just the general team building philosophy. I think Kevin Adams really does believe in these prospects. But if you do believe in these prospects, you got to play them. Point blank.
Like the fact that Bryson was, and it wasn't Rusak. I mean, it's not like it's a far drive for him to get here. Like,
yeah, that was, I would imagine that was probably a last minute type thing. They probably thought that Zach Benson was going to be ready, and then maybe he just wasn't able to go for some reason. I can't imagine that was their plan. I would hope not, at least. But,
me too.
Yeah, Lindy's a more experienced roster builder. I mean, in term lineup production person than that. Like, he would never put a forward. He would never put a defense on forward if that was like his option for hours. You know what I mean?
I would hope, man. I just if they're not practicing tomorrow, I'm worried. And I'd have to imagine if they don't expect. I mean, we haven't heard anything yet. I would expect them to be practicing tomorrow because I think we would have heard about a call up for a winger by now. It's 8:30 at night. Practice ended. What time? Like, I can't imagine they're waiting again till tomorrow morning to find out these guys can practice. Like, you would think at the very least, I'm not sure what the rules are, you would at least have him ready to go in Buffalo, hopefully, in case you need him to practice tomorrow, because I'm not comfortable with having Jacob Bryson on the fourth line wing. Just not. When you're 0-2 and staring 0-3 in the face.
Jake Bryson's not playing forward on Thursday night, regardless. I can tell you that pretty confidently.
Yeah. So, your thoughts on the Swayman contract? We didn't really talk about that. Finally, Swayman got signed. I know we're kind of going off topic with this, and then the news today with Igor Shesterkin turning down $11 million.
I didn't see that. Is it 11 a year?
11 a year for 8 years, $88 million. He turned it down. This is per Kevin Weeks.
And Swayman got 8.825.
Is like 8.5 or 8.25 or 8.5.
Well,
but Igor turned down $11 million a year.
Yeah, it was 8.25, and I remember that obviously because of Don Sweeney's comment, $64 million, take it or leave it. So shout out Jeremy Swayman. He won that battle as far as I'm concerned because he got the extra $0.25 million per year. So I think that's a good deal as far as he's concerned, and also as far as the Bruins are concerned. If you look at their game right now against the Panthers, they're down 3-1, and the goaltending hasn't been amazing. Jonas Korpisalo is a pretty solid backup, and he can win you a game here and there. But as you saw with the Senators last year, he is not a legitimate top 15 to top 20 NHL starter. So they absolutely needed to get whatever they needed to do, whether that was an extra $250,000 a year that Jeremy Swayman wanted, or incentives, or anything related to that. They absolutely needed to get that done, and they did. So credit to them. And Igor Shesterkin, $11 million. I don't know, especially given what Jeremy Swayman just signed for. I don't know how much better. I mean, I guess he's had more prolonged success than Jeremy Swayman, but as it currently stands, I could blindfold myself and put my hand into a basket and take out Jeremy Swayman's name or Igor Shesterkin's name, and I'd be perfectly happy with either goalie. And I think the Rangers would probably say the same thing. So as far as he's concerned, that seems a little bit presumptuous, but he knows his value, I guess. And they don't have the best backup in the world. I know that. Well, I guess Jonathan Quick was pretty good last season, but how long is Jonathan Quick going to maintain those numbers? Probably not much longer. So he probably has a little bit of leverage and a pretty good bargaining position. And I will never fault a professional athlete or anyone who is confident in their craft and their ability to get what they want in a free capitalist economy. So good for him, and I hope he gets what he thinks he's worth.
Yeah. A couple more comments in here from the Peanut Gallery before we get to final predictions. Connor or Duane, what is the Sabres' identity? Please enlighten me from our boy Mauricio.
I'll let you take that one.
What? No. I think he's asking you.
I spelled my name.
I think identity. I think that really lies in the bottom six, right? Like, tougher to play against. That's been the narrative since the day Lindy took over. This team's gonna be tougher to play against. Accountability. I mean, I think we're going to get a good look at this team's identity over the next 2 weeks. How do they respond to starting 0-2? How do they respond to being the same old Sabres from last year? I think that is what we're going to see, like in terms of identity. That is what the team we see over the next 2 weeks and how they responded. And you got to imagine Lindy Ruff did not want, I mean, he probably wouldn't have minded going 1-1 on that trip. He probably obviously wants to go 2-0, but to go 0-2 against a team that fired you less than 6 months ago, fuck. Like, I would have been fired up. Like, I would have been pissed off. So I think you're going to get a real good look at this team's identity over the next 2 weeks, if fully healthy, coming into the home opener.
Yeah, I would hope that their identity is something closer to what we saw in 2022 and 2023 than it is to strictly being tougher to play against. Obviously, you rebuilt your bottom six, but I think that was a supplemental move to support the playmakers and the skilled guys that you believe that you do have in your top six. The reason they were so close to making the playoffs in 2023, at the end of 2023, was because they were one of the highest scoring teams in the league and they had a top 5 power play. And then all of that went absolutely to shit last season. So I would hope that having those guys to play those tougher minutes in the bottom six and play the PK and give guys like Tage and Tuck and Cousins and Quinn and hopefully Peterka and Dahlin and Power on the power play the ability to do what they do best, which is offensive shot creation and playmaking. I want that to be the identity. That would be great. That's the identity that's going to get this team to the playoffs, and that's going to get this team to break a 13-year playoff drought. Being tougher to play against is all fine and dandy, but being tougher to play against is not going to win you a significant amount of games. It's marginal at best, and it only supports what actually matters on this team, which is getting back to that level of goal scoring and finishing that you saw 2 years ago. So that's what I hope the identity is. And if it's not, then this is gonna lead to 14 years pretty quickly.
Yeah. I think you can still be tough to play against, obviously, but still get what you want to, what your version of the identity is too. I just don't think they did enough or really anything in the offseason to make me sit here and think this team is going to be better offensively because
I just think, like, you look at that 2022, 2023 roster and you compare it to this roster at its best, I think they're pretty similar teams, provided that Tage and Tuck and Cousins are producing at that level.
Listen, there's two. You can say it's similar all you want. Jack Quinn has proven nothing in the NHL. He has proven nothing. I hope he reaches that glass ceiling. But you did not replace your 30-plus goals that you lost with Jeff Skinner, and you don't have a legitimate third-line center that you lost with Casey Middlestat. And looking
I do think, not necessarily in terms of production, and Middlestat was, I mean, yeah, he I think his role was largely as a third line center, but he did play a lot on the power play. I do think McLeod is going to turn into a reliable third line center. I really do believe that.
You would hope so, man.
I mean, the numbers in Edmonton really do support it, honestly, and all indications are, in terms of the value of Savoy, obviously.
The numbers support it. He had 30 points, and he did it on the wing with Leon Draisaitl.
But that's the thing, though. Like, in every situation, though, he's a two-way player. And Middlestat was not a two-way player.
I'm not denying that he's a two-way player, but Middlestat was a two-way player who produced 60 points a season.
Well, I'm saying Middlestat wasn't a two-way player. He didn't contribute much defensively at all.
I mean, wasn't he the analytical, baby, according to all the analytics people? Like
offensively, he was.
Yeah, but I mean, again, I never heard anything bad about Middlestat defensively. Like,
I wouldn't say it was the worst. He wasn't Jeff Skinner.
No,
but he was way closer to Jeff Skinner than he was to Ryan McLeod. So I would argue that what you gained in Ryan McLeod and surrounding him with better line mates, which would have been nice, is a situation. Then you lost Casey Middlestat, but you at least used a top prospect to get someone who is a quality NHL player. And that's what I believe Casey Middlestat is. So, yes, it's not ideal, but I do think that move is going to turn out to be a pretty good one.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope you're right. From our boy producer Steve here, Call up Johnson for the third pair left-handed D. Have Joker and Clifton bar fight in a death in a cage match for the third pair right-hand defense.
Not a bad idea.
Listen, what is keeping Ryan Johnson off of this roster? I know we have a lot of left-handed defensemen, but what are you seeing out of that bottom pairing? You know what I mean? That like can justify us not at least giving him a look if things don't turn around here.
Yeah, it's especially if it doesn't turn around, it would be pretty inexcusable. And I would hope that they would at least give other guys a shot in that case, because he played pretty well in his time up in the league last season. Obviously, it was in a situation where there were injuries and he was a rookie, but now that he's got some experience, you would hope for more development from him. So, yeah, I would like having, I mean, he technically isn't another left shot guy, but I think that his skill set and his playmaking would add a lot to this team, especially to a guy like Lindy, as we've mentioned before, who loves offense from his defense. He loves guys jumping into the play.
Yeah.
Obviously, we need more of that from Power and Darlene than we saw this weekend, but I do think that's going to come, hopefully on the power play primarily. So, yeah, I mean, I would love it. I think a lot of people really like Ryan Johnson's game. But as it currently stands, obviously, you got to look at the contracts and you got to look at the what Adams and Ruff and a lot of these guys are probably thinking that they've got more experience in the NHL and Jokiharju and Clifton, and they're not necessarily going to lose their spot unless it's something egregiously horrible. So that's where it stands right now.
Got a hot take here from Gargalant. Igor is overrated. You guys are goalies. Don't you agree?
I don't.
No, neither do I. I think Igor is a fantastic goaltender. I think
you saw it in the playoffs last year too. How good
he played out his head. He
had a rough start to the year in the regular season, but he really responded, and he was a reason they went as far as they did.
As a goalie, though, I just don't agree with paying goalies that kind of money.
No,
I think that only works in the state of Florida because it's a non-tax state. And look at Sam Reinhart, signed probably below his market value. He took less than $9 million a year, what it was after a 50-goal season. I think Kachuk is signed below his market value. These guys are willing to take less money to build a winner. And you've seen it with Vasilevsky. Obviously, he's making over $10 million. Bob is making over $10 million. But the teams around them, players are willing to take a little bit less to keep the teams competitive and always being in the hunt for a Stanley Cup. Unlike, obviously, in the state of New York, where state tax does play a big part. So, I can see why Shesterkin wants more than that. I think he knows his value, but I just can't see the Rangers being able to pay him more than that. Like, I mean, you have a lot of players. Lafreniere is going to be up for contract soon, I think, if he's you know what I mean? Like, he's starting to come around. You have other players that you're already paying a lot of money to. Does Igor hit free agency? Does he become a UFA after this season?
I don't know off the top of my head personally.
No, I'm pretty sure this is like the last year of his deal. Like, do they let him go to free agency? Do they trade him?
No, they don't.
Like, but the thing is, like, I was talking to Lazzy. I texted him and I said, "Hey, man, like, is it true that he really turned down $11 million?" He goes, his only response this was his response to me. He goes, "Somebody out there will pay him."
Yeah, somebody will.
Guy covers the Rangers directly.
Yeah, because you don't get a top 5 goalie every day of the week. But yeah, I think the Rangers specifically, there's no way they're going to let him walk. There's no, and I think Igor probably knows that. He's probably bargaining in the sense like, oh, like I want 11, and then they'll give me 10, and I'll be happy with 10 when I was already would have been happy with 9.5.
He already turned down 11.
Yeah, but I think that's not necessarily what's going to actually transpire. Personally,
I mean, what do you think? He's holding out for 11.25?
No. I know he turned down 11, but I think that's just starting high, and you turn it down in the initial negotiation, and then you eventually get to like 10.5, 10, and then you go from there. I really don't think that's what he's actually expecting.
But why would you? I guess I don't understand what you're saying. Like, why would you turn down 11 if you're only going to agree to 10.5?
It's a bargaining position. He knows his leverage, right? Like, he's asking for way more. He's probably comfortable with a number, and he's turning it down so that the Rangers know what to expect and what his bargaining position is. But eventually, I think they can meet in the middle in an incentive-laden situation where it works out better for him than it originally did. Personally,
if I was willing to settle for 10.5, I wouldn't turn down 11.
But that's just the first negotiation, right? It's a long-standing process, and I think that he probably, I don't know what the highest paid goaltender in the league is. It's probably Hellebuck. I'm not sure what he makes, but there's no way that he thinks that Jeremy Swayman, who just signed for 8.25, and he's younger than him and probably just as good at this point, that the Rangers are going to continue to offer that moving forward. It just doesn't make sense.
We'll see. Got a couple more comments in here. The Sabres are light years away from being able to compete with the big dogs like the Panthers. Recall 2 years ago, we were beaten out of the playoffs by 1 point by the Panthers that went to the finals that year. We fizzled. Again, from Gargalant. Pam said Johnson has been a liability on defense. I mean, cool. Paul Hamilton said that. Okay. I don't know. I hate what I saw out of Ryan Johnson when he did play.
Well, you also know that, yeah, he's a defenseman, but the ceiling of Ryan Johnson's game is that he's a playmaking defenseman.
Yes. So,
yeah, you've got three guys in Yoki Haru and Samuelson and Power, and you've got these guys that are supposed to be really, really good in their defensive zone. And then you've got guys like Dahlin and Byram and also Power that have the ability to create offensively as well, which is what you need in today's league. And Ryan Johnson, yeah, as a 21-year-old, 22-year-old guy, may not be perfect defensively, as we've seen with Owen Power in his first 2 NHL seasons. But what they give you on the offensive end and moving the puck and getting it out of your zone and retrieving it and being good with the puck as a puck handler, that's what you need from your defensemen in the NHL these days. And that's the trend moving forward. Who are the best two defensemen in the NHL? Kel McCarr and Quinn Hughes. What do? They handle the puck well. They are playmakers. They support their forwards and also are pretty good defensively. They're not shut down defensemen.
No.
But they do both, and they do it really well.
We got a comment here from intern Joey Sultana. You know who we can really use right about now? Jeff Skinner. But no, we need a new scoreboard and roof. Some snark there. I like it because that's definitely more important than actually being a good team. I mean, that's the running joke. That's where the cap money went for Jeff Skinner, was to pay for that scoreboard and roof. Maybe you haven't seen the roof yet, have you?
No, I haven't.
It's a really, really nice white roof.
Come in handy this winter.
I think the Porter Johns are still up there too from the construction workers. Last time I drove on the Skyway, they were still up there. Any predictions for Thursday night?
So I was just looking at the line. The Kings are a slight favorite, -115 on the money line. Sabres are -105. So that's basically a toss-up, but on home ice, that means that the Kings are definitely favored. Over/under 6.5. And obviously, yes. So the Kings -1.5 is +210. Sabres +1.5, -258. So that implies there's a pretty good chance the Sabres come within one goal. As you said, I see this team a lot. I see them practice at the rink I play beer league at. I go to a lot of games. I see them on TV a lot. Not necessarily the team you want to play in your home opener, especially coming off playing against the Devils. They are well built up and down the lineup, and I think they have much better goaltending than they did last season. I do think that it's going to be a little bit more of a tight game just because I think Lindy is going to really hone in, hopefully with his defensemen, on not having those giveaways in their own zone, forwards being a little bit more responsible in their neutral zone, but while also doing what they do best as forwards, which is hopefully scoring goals. I would say it goes under. It's a 6-goal game, maybe 5. I could see like a 3-2 game, maybe the Kings winning in overtime or a shootout. I think the Kings have a better chance to win, but if it is a 1-goal game, that gives the Sabres every single opportunity to win. Gun to my head, I think Kings win by 1 or 2 goals just because I do think they're a better team right now. But if you learn to correct the mistakes that you made this past weekend, you have a little pride playing in front of your home fans, and it's Lindy's first game back in however many years in Buffalo. Hopefully it's going to be close to a sellout crowd. I think hopefully that can push them over the edge, and the Sabres could also win a 1-goal game. So we'll see what happens, but I do warn everybody not to get their expectations too high.
Are you gonna panic if we get a similar game to what we saw in Europe?
If they're not competitive, if they are not in the game at all after the first period, or if, let's say, they come out and they're down 2-0 after the first and the game is probably over at that point because the Kings can play a really, really good shutdown defensive game after that, and then there's no chance of winning, yeah, the panic meter is a little higher, especially who you have coming in the building on Saturday, which is the Florida Panthers. So
who are currently beating the Boston Bruins 4-1.
Yeah, I would say that increases the urgency, which should already be there significantly. It's a really important game because you have way less of a chance of beating the Panthers on Saturday than you do the Kings on Thursday. So you don't treat it like a playoff. Well, you should treat every game like a playoff game at this point, given that you haven't made the playoffs in 13 years. But yeah, especially who you have coming in on Saturday. This is not a must win, but I think it's a can't lose.
Yeah, you don't want to lose this game. I think the atmosphere in there especially when they announced Lindy's name during that opening video. I mean, I'm not sure what they have planned. I think different from what you saw in preseason, but the energy in there should be really high. I'm going to be there with Steve. Excited to get back in there and watch them play. But yeah, I'm a little concerned, man, if they come out flat again and they don't come out ready to play again. At some point here, how long does it take if everything goes wrong and this team starts like 2-8, like you're Kevin Adams, like A, you got to feel like your job is seriously at risk, and B, like, are you making some type of decision out of desperation there to improve this roster? So
yeah, after the first 10 games, I would say
like 2-8 or 3-7.
Yeah, if they only have 3 wins in the first 10 games, I think he would get pretty desperate. I do.
Yeah, I think you have to you're starting to start dangling those prospects out there a little bit more, maybe even your draft picks, because let's be real, I think draft capital for this team isn't as important this year as it's been in the past. You have the prospects in place. So, final thoughts.
I would say largely most of the conversation that we've had today, and that comes down to not necessarily harping too much on what happened this past weekend, but feeling the emotion of what is hopefully going to be there on Thursday night. Obviously, a little bit less had the weekend gone better in Prague, but you use that as one of the main things that happened this offseason, as one of the smartest moves, even especially from a PR perspective, that the Sabres could have done, bringing Lindy back. And you play your game. You get pucks deep, you play with speed, and you try to make plays. You definitely got to get more shots on net, and you got to find lanes. I would say that it was a theme of last season, getting a lot of shots blocked. And you got to do whatever you possibly can to get that puck to the net, get some dirty goals, because that's exactly what the Kings are going to do. They play with a lot of aggression. They get to the front of the net. They've got big, really, really skilled forwards like Kempe and Byfield, and even Arthur Kaliev, and a lot of guys that can put pucks in the net very easily. So you're going to need to match that as much as you possibly can, and that's playing with emotion, that's playing with speed, and that's playing with urgency. And we saw it in spurts this past weekend, but we didn't see enough of it. So I would say urgency is the word, and that starts with the first period. Got to have a good start, and then you go from there.
I love Quentin Byfield, man. Everyone knows how I felt about him. I thought the Sabres should have offer sheeted the shit out of him when they had the chance to, and the guy only took like $6.5 million, which I think the LA is going to be so happy about that contract in 2 years. Yeah, I couldn't agree with all your points more, Hurls. One last point here from Captain Ahab. Why isn't anyone hitting the like button? That is true. If you're watching on Twitter, Facebook, our YouTube page, please make sure you're subscribing, hitting that like button. It really does help us a lot when you're searching for hockey content on all of those platforms. Helps people notice us a little bit more. So please make sure you're subscribing and hitting that like button. And as always, Remember, this has been brought to you by Fatty Beer Company, Western York's premier market and tap room. With over 300 beers to choose from, Fatty Beer is one of the best spots for your happy hour needs, for your Buffalo Sabres needs, your Buffalo Bills needs. Make sure you go check them out at all of their locations and get down there Monday night in Lancaster for their block party. It's free to the public. They're going to have food on site, food trucks, drinks from Fatty Beer. Make sure you go check them out. And of course, as always, Buffalo Go. One of my favorite places to get any of my Bills or Sabres apparel from. So one last comment here from intern Joey. When JJ is back, I kind of want to see him back with Cousins and Quinn. They had a few shifts together the first 2 games, and every one of those shifts were electric. Couldn't agree with you more, Joey. So I am Duane. This has been episode 164, 2 Goalies, 1 Mike. We will talk to you on Thursday night, after the home opener. Hopefully we'll be talking about the first win of the 2024-2025 season. I am Duane. We'll see you later. And as always, go Sabres.